Welcome, everybody, to this wonderful event. We want to thank you for coming. And again, you are at International Voice Fusing Japan and the United States, Views from Karen Hill Anton. And we would like to thank the Dornsife College of Letters, Arts, and Sciences at the University of Southern California, as well as the USC Shinso Ito Center for sponsoring this event. And Karen Hill Anton is coming to us from her home in Shizuoka Prefecture in Japan. So I am going to share with you her incredible biographical journey, which is, of course, still continuing because she's writing a lot of interesting things. And I have to apologize because I have to read it to you because it is flourishing. So here we go. So Karen Hill Anton brings the wisdom of experience to her writing, connecting perspectives on Native culture within U.S. culture. A resident of Japan for nearly 50 years, Ms. Anton's unique views offer a fascinating transnational understanding of two inextricably linked cultures. A writer, columnist, consultant, and coach, she is well known for writing popular columns for key periodicals in Japan, including Crossing Cultures for the Japan Times and Another Look for Chunichi Shimbun. She has consulted for many global corporations in Japan, including Citibank, Eli Lilly, Shinsei Bank, and JP Morgan, among others. And she has coached senior executives in the finance, pharmaceuticals, and software industries. She has been especially successful in guiding Japanese women seeking to change careers, make significant lifestyle alterations, as well as wanting to re-enter the workforce after their maternity leaves. She is Emerita, Board of Governors, Temple University, Japan Campus, Shizuoka Human Rights Association, the Jun Ashida Educational Foundation Committee, and is an Allman Fellow and Freeman Foundation Fellow. Karen Hill Anton was invited to serve on the Internationalization and Society Advisory Council of Prime Ministers Keizō Obuchi and Ryutaro Hashimoto. Ms. Anton has presented workshops and seminars on the craft of memoir and fiction writing for the Japan Writers Conference and the Society of Writers, Editors, and Translators. Having studied for many years, she has achieved second-degree mastery in Japanese calligraphy. Originally from New York City, she has raised her four children and made her home with her husband, William Anton, in the rural province of Shizuoka, Japan, since 1975. Her memoir, which you're going to hear a little bit from today, The View from Breast Pocket Mountain, is the grand prize winner of the 2022 Memoir Prize for Books, 2021 BRAG Medallion, and the 2020 SPR Book Awards Gold Prize. The View from Breast Pocket Mountain is a treasure trove of experiences crossing borders and cultures, creating a life and finding contentment in a far-off country. A Thousand Graces is her first novel. Set in the 1970s Showa era of Japan, it evokes nostalgia for a simpler time as traditional customs and values fade away and Japanese society inexorably changes to meet the expectations and demands of a more modern world. Roger Pulvers, author of Live, calls the novel, quote, a magnificent coming-of-age story of desire, passion, and the getting of wisdom, unquote. In a recent interview, the novelist David Joyner, author of Kanazawa, describes the novel as, quote, nothing less than a masterpiece, end quote. To listen to Ms. Anton's speaking engagement with the Tokyo American Club or her interview with Now and Zen Japan, please visit the USC Shinso Center website and click on the provided links. And more information can be found at KarenHillAnton.com. So I am, by the way, I didn't introduce myself. I am Valina Hasu-Houston, and I am a distinguished professor at the University of Southern California, as well as the USC resident playwright. And I am so honored to be able to have anything to do with hearing Karen Hill Anton at USC. So welcome, and welcome also to the audience. And so without further ado, I'll just give you a little sense of the structure for today. Karen is going to share with us an excerpt from her memoir and then an excerpt from her novel. And then there will be an interactive discussion that I will have with her that will explore more of her journey, her literary journey. And after that discussion finishes, the Q&A will open up so that we can get questions from you, the audience members, about her work or something else that we talk about, which will inevitably be related to her work. I do want to say that this is so important. We talk so much in US society right now about intersectionality. Well, Karen Hill Anton is organic intersectionality. Okay. She has come from a culture in the United States and for 50 years melded that with the culture in Japan and brought together a lot of different traditions and cultures and ideas. And I think that that is so significant, particularly as we at least speak and try to achieve a kind of globalism. So thank you so much, Karen, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Valina. It's really a pleasure, and I truly appreciate being invited to speak at USC, even virtually. One of these days, I would love to appear in person on the campus.
That would be lovely. We would certainly be blessed to have you. So I guess without further ado, we'll go to your wonderful work and hear what it is you're exploring as a writer. So in the first thing that Karen will share with us is an excerpt from her memoirs, which will tell you a little bit about this organic intersectionality that I'm talking about. And so Karen, please take away an excerpt from The View from Breast Pocket Mountain by Karen Hill Anton.
Thank you. I'll begin by saying, we'd been living in Vermont when my husband, Billy, was invited to study at a martial arts and yoga dojo, which is a training center in Shizuoka Prefecture, Japan. We decided to take the long way here and drove overland in a Volkswagen Beetle from Europe. We crossed northern Italy and then drove border to border across the former Yugoslavia, and then Bulgaria, Turkey, Iran, and Afghanistan. We then took public transportation through Pakistan, India, Nepal, and Thailand. We were on the road for 1 year with our daughter, Nanao, who was then 5 years old, before arriving in Japan on June 1st, 1975. When my husband's 1-year commitment at the dojo came to an end, we said, let's stay in Japan a little longer. That was 48 years ago. Our first home here was in a farming community at Futokoroyama, and that can be translated as Breast Pocket Mountain, and it is from that I take the title of my memoir. I will now read a short excerpt from chapter 16 of the memoir. We went straight from living in a dojo to living in an old, isolated farmhouse at the top of a mountain. I'm not sure what made us think we could plop ourselves down in the middle of a Japanese farming community and make a life there, but that's what we did. Meeting the owner of the farmhouse, he told us that it had been his childhood home, but none of his family wanted to live in it now. It's pretty far out in the country, he said. Great, my husband said. Where? It's about 1 hour away from the city of Hamamatsu. Great, my husband said again. You like to be in the country? The owner of the farmhouse said. Yes, we like it. I heard you're from New York City. We are. The owner drove us to the farmhouse, driving on narrow paved roads that turned into unpaved ones with steep drops, until finally we came to Futokoroyama, Breast Pocket Mountain. Taking one look at the place, my husband and I said simultaneously, this is it. The farmhouse had been vacant for years, but we could tell with a little cleaning and fixing, we could make it not just livable, but nice. How much is the rent? My husband, Billy, asked. Oh, you can live in it for free, the owner said, adding he'd rather have people living in it than to leave it to be destroyed by mold and mildew, insects, and weasels. It was now 2 years since we'd left the United States and paying jobs. We'd managed, seeming to require little money after our basic needs were met. Our savings, such as they were, amounted to the small allowance we were given at the dojo, the training center. And although free sounded good, Billy insisted the owner accept 5,000 yen a month, which is about $50. We were charmed by the old house. Traditionally simple, every room had tatami, the windows were paper screen shoji, the doors sliding screen fusuma. The view, not quite the word to describe a panorama of bamboo groves, tea plantations, and rice fields, mountains and endless sky that gave you the feeling you were not just at the top of the mountain, but the world. The view was spectacular. Traditional simplicity also meant the house didn't have even one convenience. The kitchen, situated at the cold, dark north side, had a beaten earth floor, doma. There was a small, rusty two-burner stove for cooking and a kamado, which is a hearth built into the side of the kitchen. Later, I find its huge pots were perfect to boil dough for bagels. There was no plumbing system. Water came into the house through a length of split bamboo connected to a tank on the hill above. It was running water, but it didn't run in hot. Every night we needed to build a fire to heat the bath, and if we wanted hot water during the day, we had to boil it. The almost primitive living situation didn't faze me. I'd lived on the road for a year, camping most of the time, and then in the dormitory at the dojo. The mountaintop location gave us not just a soul-satisfying view, but a home. Now I will add, we still live in Shizuoka Prefecture, and this is where I'm speaking now. And for some of you who don't know, Shizuoka is almost in the center, the geographical center of the main island of Honshu, Japan. And our home now, which we had built 33 years ago, is about just a half an hour from that old farmhouse. If I walk out of my door and drive, I could be in that old farmhouse again. I'll add here that adjusting to life in Japan has been a process. I had to adjust and adapt and ultimately accept the society I'd chosen to live in. It's been largely a painless process, but of course, there have been challenges along the way. I had a lot to learn. Early on, I realized that I would benefit by paying attention and observing. Over time, I would not only change, but grow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. So interesting. Again, organic intersectionality, whether you liked it or not, right?
Exactly.
So now Karen is going to share with us an excerpt from her novel, her first novel, A Thousand Graces, which I've had the pleasure to read 3 times now.
3 times. Oh, okay.
I like to read things more than once because I learn something new each time. So
actually, and the novelist David Joyner just told me that he'd recently finished it. And he said he will definitely be reading it again to, what he said, to learn, to be inspired, and to aspire to. And he's the one who called it a masterpiece. I assure you, I will repeat that as many times as I have a chance to. Okay, this is just a very short excerpt from A Thousand Graces, and it's from the first chapter. And A Thousand Graces is can be a translation of the main character's name. Her name is Chie. Chie was a good student, practically embarrassed by her seiseki, class standing. It wouldn't win her friends. She knew her teachers would soon begin to encourage her to go to college, and then her problems would begin because then she would be presented with the world of possibilities. She had gone on to high school, watching more than half of her class leave ninth grade and leave schooling for the last time of their 15-year-old lives. They were now working at home on family farms. Some of the girls might work in shops as cashiers. The boys could work as junior auto mechanics. In a few years, they'd all be married, children would follow, and life would be a settled matter. So simple, so uncomplicated, so what Chia didn't want. Marriage and children would be all right with her one day, but she didn't want that day to come too soon, before she was ready, before she had seen or done anything that wasn't predetermined. She wondered how much of her life she would be able to create, how much she would be able to leave up to chance. While she sensed the temptation of what could be imagined, she was fearful of what was unknown and feared most any big change that would take her away from her life, her family, from all she knew. Still, she could spend hours daydreaming about things she didn't know. She wanted to know so much more about history, geography, biology, much more than she learned in school. She kept her interest in English to herself. She felt English, especially, would get her in trouble. She had found out too much through reading, found that there was a world available to her through books that was not meant to be there for her. Reading could have no more purpose than to make her curious about a life she could never know. But she realized she could know it. Because it existed, it also existed for her. And it made her a dreamer. Waking up from a night's sleep, quiet and alone, she would dream while fully awake.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I think that we'll learn a bit more about these characters as well as your work in the memoirs through the questions I'm about to ask you. But I just want to remind the audience again that we'll open the Q&A right after we finish this discussion so that we can also hear your questions too and address them together. Okay. So, and again, I'll apologize. I have to look over here because of issues beyond my control. So the question that I always think is interesting, and certainly I as a writer get asked this, and it's interesting to hear about. Why do you write? What generates your desire to write, and why is that important to you to express yourself through writing?
Yeah, I guess I mean there are many reasons, and I think probably number one, and I imagine this is also true for other writers. It's a way to reach other people, to connect with other people. And for example, when I, after my memoir was published and was well received, and as you said, you know, had received a number of awards, the most rewarding experience for me was hearing from readers, and quite a few wrote to me directly, just to say how much it resonated with them, how much my story resonated with them. And of course, it isn't that people had the same experiences or had traveled or lived in Japan or grew up in Washington Heights or New York City, but there's something I think, you know, that I was able to, touch in terms of the universality of the human experience. And writing gives you the opportunity, I think, to do that almost more than talking. Of course, there's nothing wrong with talking, but you're able to delve in a way when you write, and you know, be so careful with the words that you choose that it has that, I would say, a very special experience of almost essentializing experience and communication between people. I should also add, where I live, um, you can't see it, but it's the middle of the countryside in Japan, the Inaka as they call it. It's right where I am now. It's not as much as a farming community as where we lived originally, but this it's still pretty isolated. There are no foreigners anywhere near where I live. My husband is the only one I speak to in English on a daily basis. So it's yeah, it's a solitary life in many ways. And I'm not a hermit. I don't want anyone to think that, but it really gives me the opportunity to spend hours a day at at my writing, and to just close out the world. Um, there is no day I'm at a Starbucks, for example, sipping coffee, and not that I don't enjoy that kind of thing, but the kind of life I live really is inducive to writing.
Great. So that's actually an interesting segue to what I want to ask you next, which is, here, 50 years ago, you chose to live your life in Japan as opposed to the United States. So what generated that choice? And do you feel that it's created for you a special lens through which you can see society and therefore write about these characters, like in the novel, for instance?
Okay. Yeah, it wasn't so much a choice to live in Japan. As I said in the reading from the memoir, my husband was invited to study here for 1 year, and we kind of assumed we'd leave after the first year. But then we said, well, let's stay a little longer. And as I said, that was 48 years ago. And I think deciding to stay, and really we didn't really decide to stay until I guess we've been here about 15 years, and once we got permanent residency, that our lives were just unfolding in a way that worked for us and for our children, and it seemed Japan's a good place to live. Why leave? And I can tell you now, with so much of what's going on in the world, that wow, I think we made a really good choice. I'm very glad to be living in Japan. And it gets living here during the time of my life that I have, and it's it's really the country where I've matured. It gives me a lens on um, I would say looking at the world in general, looking at how other societies live, what's important in other cultures, and a deep appreciation for Japanese society and culture. I'll say here, one of the things I especially like about Japan is it is so orderly, it is so unchaotic, it is so I mean there is a respectfulness, I would say, in just the general society when you go out, when you go to stores, whether you're at the gas station or a clinic or whatever, the interaction is always just so respectful that you get used to it and becomes very comfortable, and it can be almost what can I say, rough with visiting some other places.
I understand that. I mean, I've actually found that true, and I wonder for you too if this is a factor. I found that true to be true in rural Hawaii, not urban Hawaii, and also
Hmm.
place. I was recently in Nova Scotia, and I spent some time in Canada, and I find that to be true here. It's true in those places as well. Do you think that part of that lack of chaos and genteel kind of feeling that you have has to do with the fact that you live in a rural area as opposed to an urban area of Japan?
Not really, because two of my daughters now live in Tokyo, so I get to go there quite often. And you would be amazed. You wouldn't, because you've also know Japan. But even a city as large as Tokyo, um, and it's definitely one of the largest cities by population in the world, very crowded. But if you go in the train station, just the cleanliness factor almost. I mean, I've been here, almost 50 years. It's shocking in a way. You will notice if there's a tissue on the floor of a station where 8 million people are passing through. If anyone, if when people bump into each other, there's always a sense of, grace, almost in the way people live and interact. And yeah, what can I say? I find it just a wondrous thing, and I appreciate it so much. I really do. And and for example, it's like seeing like the lack of graffiti, which I've come to really dislike intensely. And part of it from visiting the United States, but also in Europe, where you will see buildings that are 100 years, hundreds of years old, beautiful buildings in Italy, in throughout Scandinavia and the UK, that have just been ruined by the fact that someone, for his or her own gratification, decided that they could just write on it, and really damage it. And um, I can count the number of times I've seen graffiti in Japan. I'm absolutely serious. I could literally count the number of times. It basically doesn't exist here. And one of the reasons is that there is a sense that we're all sharing the common space. This is the commons. It doesn't belong to anyone, and that it's necessary to always share it with respect.
Right. I mean, often when I hear the term climate change, which I take very seriously, I'm very interested in, I feel that it's not only the climate, the geographical climate we need to be thinking of. I also think it's the climate of humanity, because
Yeah.
that's also changing. You
Mm.
mentioned that in terms of meeting the modern world and your writing. So I think that's important. I remember when I was a teenager, my mother said to me that the Western world would probably be a lot better off if they all learned to bow too, if bowing was part of the.
Oh, isn't that interesting? Yeah.
And I think that, it does create a certain kind of immediate respect or interest or connection with the person you're bowing to,
Yeah.
uh, versus saying nothing at all when you're standing in an elevator going down four floors.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so Karen, when did you begin writing? I mean, I know you've been writing different ways all the time. So, I mean, obviously, at some point in your life, that instinct came forward and you started.
Yeah.
And so, when
Well,
did?
when we lived in Vermont, and what were the years I lived there? I think it was about 71 to 74. I did some writing at that time, just short stories, and was something I could do and did, but I was never, I would say, serious about writing. But once we were in Japan, and again when we were living at Futokoroyama, and if I say how isolated I am here, it was much more so there, much more. So I really had a lot of time for writing, a lot of opportunity to be introspective. And I was living in this culture about which I was uh, really experiencing for the first time and observing. And there were things I wanted to say, and so I started writing essays. And I was able to have a few of them translated and published. And some others I just wrote because I wanted to. There might be commentaries about the children's schools, or our neighborhood. But then when I had the opportunity to write a regular column for Chunichi Shimbun, and started in 19, what was it, in 1981, about 1981 or 82. Yeah, it just opened a door for me. I was able to, write just about anything I wanted. And also for the Japan Times, which I wrote for the first time in 1979. I wrote it was supposed to be a guest piece of 500 words. And I just sat down and wrote something, and it was 2,000 words. And I thought, well, I sent it in anyway, which is totally unprofessional. Of course, I would never do that now. But they loved it and decided, and instead of doing it as that for a guest column, they made it into a feature article. So it really just opened a door for me in terms of writing.
Great. I actually remember must have been like around 1980, 81. I was in Tokyo and someone first told me about you because of my own background being Japanese and Black. They said, have you met Karen Hill Anton? I said, no, but that sounds so interesting. I mean, immediately it sounded interesting to me because of,
Mhm.
combination of those cultures in a different kind of way, right? So that's
Yeah.
exciting. So you've given us little hints about your process in terms of, being in a quiet environment that is lacking in chaos. So what is your writing process like, Karen? What do you do? Do you have a structure, or is it more, what do you do?
Yeah, especially when well, first of all, I will tell you, I absolutely thrive on routine. Doing the same thing every day totally works for me. When I'm at home, when I'm traveling, that goes completely out the window. I don't, one day flows into the other. I don't make plans or look at schedules or anything. But when I'm at home, I pretty much stick to a schedule. And it's, yeah, I'm awake 6:30 or 7. I might do, something around the house or laundry. I swim every morning.
Mm.
So except for the one day in the week when I do hula, which I've taken up at a very late stage in life and love. And yeah, after I have breakfast, it's usually a very simple affair of oatmeal and tea. And then, yeah, my day starts around 11:30. I mean, I can come to my desk then. And I really like the daylight hours. I feel almost powered by the sun, I guess, because, yeah, I can be at my desk easily, yeah, 4 or 5 hours writing. But yeah, just as the sun is going down, it's almost like I back away from anything that's electric or plugs in, or I just won't have anything to do with it. But I usually get in about 4 or 5 hours at my desk writing. But if it, just like other writers, sometimes it's not happening, it's not coming, and I tend to, yeah, rather than get frustrated or face the famous writer's block or whatever. I know it's not happening for whatever reason. Um, that I'm not seeing the character clearly, or I don't feel the narrative is flowing. I didn't get that chapter right, or or it's usually it's something like just a paragraph that isn't working. And I tend to just stop and go do something else. Go sit on the deck, look at a tree, you know, or organize a drawer or a closet.
Absolutely. No, I think that's great. I mean,
Yeah,
I actually stopped too, and I think that
yeah,
I always say that I don't believe in writer's block because I don't think it's being blocked. I think, like you say, you just come to a point where that next step isn't, just
it isn't there.
there. It
Yeah,
isn't there, and so you go do something else, and then it
right.
comes, right, and you go on with your writing.
Yeah.
And I love what you say about going outside and just looking around. My mother used to say that 10 to 15 minutes out of each day we must look at things that are green in nature, and
Oh,
right, and that's
mhm.
basic. You're doing that, and
Yeah,
you
I'm
live in that.
surrounded by it.
You live in that as well, which is fascinating. Now, may I ask, when you're in your writing process, are you using ink and pen, paper, or are you on a computer? What do you do?
Yeah. Well, like everyone else in the world now, I write on well, this is an iMac, but for years, and I mean for many, many years, I only would write with a 2B pencil. And my husband still what can I say, jokes with me about it, because he brought the first computer in our house. I wouldn't even look at it, you know. And I said, no, I just want to use my 2B pencil or my Mont Blanc pen, which I had for many years. And now when he sees me at the computer, oh, I see you with your 2B pencil or whatever. It's like I was working for you. But no, I normally write at the computer, but sometimes I do need to stop and just have a pen in my hand or a pencil. It doesn't matter, and just write out some parts, on paper. Or I sometimes, when a word is not coming to me, I will try and yeah think of the words, that the word I'm looking for. And I can tell you, I was writing for a number of years before I even used the thesaurus feature on the computer, because I had a thesaurus, a book for many years, and then that fell apart. And then once I threw it out. I just thought, I should be able to come up with the words myself. But yeah, you don't always, and I find the thesaurus on the computer quite convenient. And that's I would say that's my process. But and I normally these days I don't print out anything until I feel I've got something that's like I really want to work with, and I need to see it on paper and in print. Otherwise, I'm able to just work, on the computer.
Right. So when you're writing, and you think back on your memoirs and also things you wrote prior to that, and or your novel, is there something that you've written, something you've created that sticks in your mind as, I don't know, a quote unquote favorite, although the word favorite is, I think, challenging, but something that you recall, something that you are happy that you created, or a thought that comes back to you time and time again from something that you wrote?
Actually, the last words in my memoir are probably my favorite. Yes, and I think it's 86,000 words out of this memoir, but I'll just read them now.
Yes,
Is
please.
that, yeah, okay. At some point in my journey, on a day I never noticed, I found that golden thread, a thing of beauty that, though it cannot be seen, connects us all. I don't know where I or how I came up with that, but that was the end of my memoir, and it really I felt it really encapsulated my experience and my feelings.
It is beautiful and it's very profound. And when I hear you read it, I think of what you said earlier about, speaking to how you love the connection with your readers and what they have to say about what they've read, because then you begin to also connect pieces,
Yes.
create a universe through your writing. So that's wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.
So yes, you're welcome. So I have a question about the future. I mean, what do you have planned next for your writing?
Well, first thing I like to say is a writer doesn't talk about what they're going to write, but of course a lot of writers do. But I tend not to, because I feel it almost dissipates, because where it's happening is it's in my head, and I need to keep it there until I put it on paper. So I have some ideas about what I might do, but I'm not certain. But there is also something very exciting about, you're thinking about something, and I know the day will come when I sit down and I start to do it, and then I will do it. But until I've actually started, I really won't speak much about what may come next.
No, I think it is critical. I think that there's something very valuable when you say that it dissipates. you
Mm-hmm.
know, because I think those kinds of things, that kind of creativity, that
Mm-hmm.
molecular energy, if you will, it has its own life. It has
Yeah.
its own dynamics. So I know I find that I have to write it first, and then I might read it to somebody close to me, but otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
it does live in the head. And if you
Yeah.
tell it, then you really have dissipated some of that energy. So I
Yeah.
think
I
very
really feel that.
critical what you're saying. So thank you so much. We're going to open up the Q&A now for
Sure.
our audience and
Happily.
they have to say, and I'm going to be looking at the Q&A as well as trying to be a good monitor. So does the audience have any questions that they'd like to share? No, I don't see any questions yet. No questions out there? If you have a question, you can post it in the Q&A. Otherwise, I'm going to ask Karen another question that I have.
Okay, sure.
Oh, no, I think one has popped up. So, okay. Yes, please. I do have a question. Um, so the first question just says, I do have a question. So I don't know what that question is yet, but the second question is it all right to assimilate? And I'm assuming that you mean the assimilation of different cultures? Karen?
You're asking the questioner.
Well, no, I was asking the question, but I'm not getting any more. So let's talk about that. Is it,
Mhm.
I don't know what it means by all right to assimilate, but what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I know what that means. And in
Oh,
my
assimilate. Okay, I've got a clarification.
yeah,
Is it all right to assimilate to another culture? And I'm not sure about what the all right might mean.
mhm.
Um, especially being mixed race myself, that it's not a question of all right. It's like one must, you know. But but for you, you know, coming from one culture to another, maybe the question is a little bit about you know, what it feels like to assimilate to another culture and what your culture in the your family in the United States versus the new culture you adopt in Japan, maybe how they feel about that.
Mhm. Yeah, well, yeah, how would I say? Well, first of all, I have very little family in the United States anymore. My eldest daughter lives in New York. I have my nephews from my late sister, but other than that, I don't have any family in the United States. But yeah, I never, even considered or thought about like assimilating. I, as I said during my reading, I felt I've adopted another culture, and I feel it not only is necessary, it's what, I feel is important to do to live in a new culture comfortably, and I feel yeah that it's a natural process, and if I couldn't do that or didn't want to do it, I wouldn't be living here.
Now the
And
question, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, 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 please, yeah.
I was just going to say that the questioner has added, is there a loss of identity by
Oh, interesting. Yeah. No, I don't, what can I say? I don't think much about identity. I really, really don't. For me, that's something very extremely shallow. Um, I don't think I've lost anything by, being who I am, an American woman, living in Japan. If anything, my identity is expanded, because I've, been able to live here and to adapt a lot of Japanese culture. But yeah, I feel every culture that I've interacted with, whether it's in the United States or in Scandinavia where I've lived, or when I visited Africa, Ghana, or Eastern Europe or whatever, I take something from it, and I feel now that it's all in me, it's all part of me, and if that's if, yeah, if that can be an identity, then that's my identity. It isn't one thing at all. Yeah.
Okay. No, that makes sense to me too, because, being mixed race, I don't see it as being half this or half that. I see it as being double or triple or multiple.
That-
I just see that. So I understand that. I want to quickly say, because I don't want to ignore this, that Stephanie wants me to convey her best wishes to you.
oh,
And then I will go on to another question that's popped up. The question is, why did you pick the story of Chie out of all the other subjects or characters?
I didn't pick it. It came to me, which I tell you, I was just the other day. I was just thinking, if someone were to ask me, you know, where did that story come from? I honestly do not know. And I can, I can tell the audience that I started writing that novel many years ago, actually in 1996. And I wasn't sure where I was going with it, and and I stopped it. I was doing other things. I put it in. I call it my infamous third drawer, and just forgot about it. Totally forgot about it. But and when I took it out again, I thought, well, this is interesting. These are interesting characters, and I couldn't even remember, creating them. But yeah, I don't know anyone like the character Chie, or her family, or the experiences she had. Who can say where these things come, or how novelists come up with their stories. I mean, I guess there was something that even if it came to me in a dream, something that lit that fire. But yeah, she's just a character in a story I created.
Excellent.
Mhm.
So another question. Well, first I'll read accolades. Rika says, thank you so much for your insights. It's always wonderful to hear you. And she has a question about the balancing act of writer, woman, mother, wife, grandmother. Could you please share some insights about this intersectional and existential reality?
Uh, just well, one, I long ago figured out there's no such thing as a superwoman. That's a comic book character, so don't try to be her. But I get so much out of what is my life. That yeah, I tried not to ever be overwhelmed by it. But I have 4 children, 10 grandchildren, expecting the 11th. Um, this, I say, writing career that I'm trying to have, and yeah, running a home, etc. It's just, yeah, I feel I'm able to compartmentalize. I know when I need to do something and not do the other thing. And I yeah, I don't ever like being hurried or flustered, or oh, I can't do this, or because the things I do, I get so much pleasure from them. And just for example, I have my two grandsons who live in Tokyo are visiting now with my daughter Mia, and I asked them the other morning, what would you like for breakfast? And genmai flakes, or English muffins, or what would you want to have? And they said pancakes. And because and they love pancakes, and I know, and I always make it for them. But I was about to go swim, and then I wanted to prepare for this, and I just thought, well, I want to be the great grandmother, and where they know they can always have their pancakes, but it couldn't happen that morning, and yeah, and so that what was done. But yeah, I just I well, especially now, it's like I'm no longer raising young children, and I know that I see the challenges. My own daughters. I have 3 daughters. Who still have young families. What they have, but I feel it's sometimes people, and not just women, take on too much. And try to do too much, to be too much, and to be too much to everyone in their lives. And it's yeah, it's I feel it's important to be able to get done the things that you want to do. But I love going to bed knowing I did during the day just what I had planned. And if I didn't, well, that's okay too. And then to wake up and and I pretty much I have my day kind of planned out, and just again compartmentalize, put those things in their place. I know how much time I need, to do a thing, and just do it. Yeah.
Yes. Sounds like a lot of time management.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm a serious time manager.
Very good.
Yeah, yeah. I sometimes say, I'm like a robot, but I'm not quite that, but still, yeah.
Well, I see we have a question from Ark Miura in Tokyo, Japan. Hi, Ark. So
Mhm.
thanks for joining us. I know it's early for you all there. So her
Oh.
question is this: is there a difference within the mindset of people in Japan between the bubble era Japan and the current, especially amongst women?
Oh, really? Actually, I couldn't really tell. You said the bubble era. I guess is that the 80s, the 90s?
Yes, the 80s and
Yeah.
very
You
early.
know, if there is, I may not be aware of it, and also probably the person knows that the difference between life in Tokyo and the life where I live is the difference between day and night. It really is. It's a different world, and a lot of what goes on in Tokyo is just not familiar to me.
Mhm.
But I mean, I see a lot of changes, especially with women, and even in our area. Um, at the time I was raising children here, for example, it was it would be unheard of. I mean, absolutely unheard of to see a young father taking their child to nursery school or kindergarten in the mornings, or picking them up. Just absolutely unheard of. And now it's a relatively common sight. I still don't see it that much around here in the rural areas, but in Tokyo, that's, yeah, it's absolutely usual, normal, and yeah, most common almost.
Well, that's an interesting change.
Mhm.
I think the entire world is still working on that and things like
Yeah.
that.
So yeah, but when this person Art refers to the bubble years, I don't know if they mean something specific to the economy of the time. I'm not sure.
Well, here's another question. An audience member says, years ago, you were a guest speaker at the JET conference, and the speaker before you discouraged us from even coming to Japan because Japan was losing its traditions. But you spoke next and encouraged the audience to continue their journey. So do you remember this? And in what small ways do you think crossing cultures changes lives or opens horizons?
Oh, that's interesting. Someone discouraged them because they're losing their traditions. If anything, now, and especially now, I see so many people and foreigners who have, you know, taken up Japanese traditions, whether in the arts, or and crafts, restaurants. One I'll tell you, one of the best Japanese restaurants I know of is in Antwerp, Belgium. uh, and it happens to be a friend of ours. So yeah, I wouldn't know. I would never say that. I just, yeah, Japan doesn't suit everyone, and I can understand that, but I would see every reason to want to learn from so much of what Japanese culture offers in the arts and in the crafts and just in daily life. But the second part of that question, I'm not sure. What was it?
In what small ways do you think crossing cultures changes lives or opens horizons?
Oh yeah, I mean, it just it. it just gives us an opportunity to share. You know, I feel in my own life that I've gotten so much from Japanese culture. I'd like to also think, yeah, that that I also have something to give as an American woman and who has different perspectives and experiences, so that there is so much to be gained on both sides from this openness and sharing.
Okay, great. I think we have time for maybe two more questions. We have one here. If someone was interested in writing a memoir, where would you suggest that they start? What writing practices would you recommend?
Oh, I wish you could have attended. I've done now two seminars on the craft of memoir. I I don't know that there's no particular place I would recommend. I think it's a wonderful experience to be able to write a memoir, to delve in that way into one's own life. But what I think probably the most important thing I would have to tell anyone who wants to do it is to remember that the delving is not about, navel gazing. And I remember an editor told me that when I started writing my memoir, she kept saying, "What's in it for the reader?" And I thought, well, I wasn't even thinking about the reader. I'm thinking, it's like I have a story to tell. I want to write it or whatever. And she reminded me of that several times. And I feel if you want to, I would say, write and publish a memoir, that think about that front end and center. That you have a story that you want to share with an unknown audience. You don't know who your audience is. The other thing I would say, and quite a few people who have written to me have also said this, is that they'd like to write a memoir, but they didn't feel that they could be honest. And I think honesty is a very important aspect in memoir. And I think, and if you can't be honest, write fiction. You can make up a story. Just don't do it. And others have said that they would like to do it, but they're afraid that they would compromise other people, family, friends, maybe people they've worked with or whatever, that they couldn't really tell the story because those people are living and they would read it. And of course, there are many memoirs that have been written that have broken up families, destroyed families. I mean, in real time that this has happened. So I think these are things to consider. And otherwise, yeah, just go for it. Do it and remember you're telling a story. It is what I always felt it was very important in writing a memoir.
Thank you. So this question is related to this. Do you prefer writing memoirs to fiction writing or vice versa?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I prefer it. I enjoyed the experience of doing both. I really did while I was doing it. I think I'm probably naturally more inclined to doing memoir because, and a lot of that probably comes out of the fact that I wrote columns and they were of a personal nature for so many years, over 15 years. But yeah, they're both very yeah, rewarding experiences. I enjoyed doing them both. I don't know if that I have another novel in me. I absolutely do not, but I can imagine that it would be possible. But yeah, probably memoir and essay are probably my favorite genre.
Excellent. Thank you. So the question is having a baby easier in Japan or in the US?
Oh, it's a good question. I'll have to ask that person because I never had a baby in the U.S.
I was about to say, all of
Yeah,
your babies
I
were in
have four.
Japan.
Yeah, four children. Well, actually, my eldest daughter is born in Denmark, and my other three children are born here. And I've written about those experiences, and that person read the memoir. 'Cause, yeah, I wouldn't say I don't know what's easier, but yeah, well, my daughters, let's see, well, two of them have had children born in the United States, and if anything, and then of course, and I have friends who have had children born there. That when I see that, what is it? After 24 hours, mothers are sent home, maybe 48 hours. I don't know what, but in Japan, it's you get 5 days in a maternity clinic, looked after, with the most loving care by midwives and a staff that has your best interest in mind. You really feel that excellent Japanese food. It's really my maternity experiences here were really wonderful, and just the fact, of course, that we have um, universal health care here, so there's no concern ever about what's it going to cost, or can I pay for it, or if I need to stay, well, I need to take out a loan or anything. Those yeah, concerns and worries are just don't exist for us here.
I mean, I will say that, all those details aside, I think that we can ask any woman who has delivered a baby that it is challenging regardless of what country you're
Oh,
in.
oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Get help. I always say get help. Especially after, yeah. I mean, one thing was have the pregnancy, the delivery, and then the aftercare or whatever. These very distinct features of for any woman giving birth.
Absolutely. So we have this question here, and I think it should be our last question, or we're going to go over. So here we go.
Mhm.
Children are bombarded with information about everything today. Do you have a message for middle school children in the United States, particularly those who reside in big cities?
Oh, oh dear, oh dear. I wish I did. I can tell you just and I don't know that much of of what's going on, and yeah, I would say for young people in the United States today, other than what I read. But I actually feel sorry for young parents now raising children, because I know that kids are literally bombarded with all of the things that are available to them on the internet. And I was yeah, pretty strict, not crazy. Well, but maybe my kids would even say crazy, when I was raising them, about television. At first, I wouldn't even allow a television in the house. And then when I did, it's like, you can only see it at this time or only on that day. I was really very particular about it. And even, about manga and comics, or, I didn't want them in the house. And uh, it, I just felt that there were distractions that I didn't want my children to have. But now that's multiplied, and magnified 100 times, and parents are really, it appears to me, under quite a lot of stress and pressure as a result of it. But to the extent that you can, I just feel, as a parent, you're in charge, and as people say, my house, my rules, and to the and I mean, it's too bad if you feel you have to be a policeman in your own house, or be watching everything all of the time. But that's really just part of the role that a parent must play. But I think it must be a tough time now for parents of young children.
Okay. Thank you, audience members, for these great questions. That was fabulous. And Karen, thank you for sharing more of your life with us and your thoughts about these different ideas. Um, so the Q&A box is now off. So I'll just say to you that I want to thank you, first of all, for being here with us. And you may not think of it as brave, but I think that there is a kind of interesting courage involved in coming from one culture and one country and building a wonderful life in another country,
Mhm.
raising children in another country, and now being a grandmother as well, and writing your memoirs and your first novel. And I hope that there are others to come as well. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to share with us about your organically intersectional life.
Well, we shall see. I would just leave the, I don't know if the audience is still there. That if anyone had a question and they weren't able to ask it, or didn't answer it properly, feel free to write me, Karen Hill Anton at gmail.com. I promise you, I will answer you. And
Well,
yeah,
thank you so much. And we look forward to a day when we can have you physically visit with us in Los Angeles at the campus. Thanks so
I
much.
would absolutely love to. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I've enjoyed it.
Absolutely. And thank you again, Dornsife, and also the Shinso Ito Center at the University of Southern California. And thank you, audience members, for joining us. That means so much to a writer. Thank you.
Thank you.